Well, welcome to another episode of Real Stories with Jordan Silvester, your host here. We've got an amazing guest today. We've got Dwan Bent-Twyford. She likes to refer to herself as the most sought after real estate investor in the United States of America. So that's fine. I'm in Canada up here. So Dwan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. What is your favorite what is your favorite childhood memory? If we can start right there, and then, if you don't mind, right after that, tell us a lot about yourself in the greater scheme of your world.
Okay. I don't know if I have like a specific favorite childhood memory, but I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and we lived out in the country. So we had like 10 acres and a garden and a cow and a pig and chickens and such. And so my cousins lived out there too. So we used to, I don't know, I always loved this. We used to like have to go out and like weed the garden and always we would pick rotten tomatoes, and next thing you know, we're like throwing rotten food and having like these nasty fruit wars in the garden and mashing rotten tomatoes on the other person and potatoes or anything that like didn't survive. Watermelons, I mean everything, just like all these food fights in the garden all the time. And I just remember like how much fun that was, and you're so dirty and you're so messy, and like you have to rinse off in the garden hose. Parents won't let you back inside the house. And so I would say food fights.
There you go.
All the summers.
That sounds like fun. And then
You haven't lived till you've had like a big rotten watermelon smashed on your head. It's so gross.
that's awesome.
Oh.
So, if you want to give us just a quick rundown from, I know we chatted a little earlier, like where you started, like in your youth, and then kind of just a quick move through where you are today. You know, you've got quite the experiential life. We'll take a quick overview, and then I'll ask some questions and deep dive in.
Okay, I love it. So I always tell people I was fired from Denny's, and I used to work on Denny's on third shift. So I just remember I was like 3:45, and I got fired, and I was walking out, and I'm looking at that yellow sign. I'm like, who gets fired from Denny's in the middle? Like, seriously, even in the middle of the night, not even through the entire shift. And so I figured at that point I have nowhere to go but up. So now I get married, I have a baby, my daughter's 8 months old. I'm planning on being like the homeroom mom, the Girl Scout mom, the field trip mom, like all those things like that. And then when my daughter was only 8 months old, her dad and I split up kind of unexpectedly. And through that, I lost a house in foreclosure. I had my car repossessed, like just a bunch of things. And so I thought, well, definitely did not expect that. So I was kind of like my come to Jesus moment. And it's like, well, what do I want to do? Now I have a baby. And at this point, by the time it's all said and done, she's like 2. It's like, what do I want to do? And I'm 30. I didn't have her until I was 30, so I'm like 32 years old. And I have no experience, no jobs other than waiting tables and bartending and stuff like that. And I was like, I really still want to have my dream of doing all the things and raising my daughter and not using daycare. And nothing against all y'all that use daycare. It's 100%. But it's just, I just had this vision, you know. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to figure out how to work for myself. Like, that's it. And so the funny thing is, I wasn't even looking for real estate. I was looking for any job I could do and work for myself from home and have my daughter with me. And so back in the 80s, for all of you youngsters, we had to find jobs in the classified section of the newspaper. So you go through the paper, that's who you call, you set job interviews, and I was kind of looking at job interviews. I was going to some multi-level marketing meetings and kind of to decide, like, what could I do? I don't know what I'm even good at. And I actually met a couple guys that were real estate investors. And they're like, we buy houses and we fix them up and we sell them. I was like, I'm really naive and I don't know what that means. So I'm thinking buy, fix up, and sell. That fix up means decorate. So I really, and I tell people from the depths of my soul, I thought I was going to decorate houses, like decorate them and put them on the market. And I've got good taste. How hard could that be? And as it turns out, decorating and rehabbing are not the same thing
Nope.
at all. But I found a house. I went door knocking, moved into the house, had my daughter with me, worked on the house while I lived in it, sold it for $22,000, which was, you know, like a year's salary for 90% of the people in America. And I was like, oh, I'm so rich. And then I moved into another one, rehabbed it, and I kept doing that until Ayla started kindergarten. And then by that time, we had real estate investing groups in South Florida. We had seminars happening, and I learned about wholesaling, so I started doing that. And I learned about rentals, and then I just progressed on up to now my husband and I are rehabbing an entire town.
Wow.
So
That's awesome.
I
A
just
whole town.
yeah, pretty much. I just trial and errored everything, which is why I like to teach people. Because I'm like, listen, I really had. I mean, I thought I was going to be decorating. That's like how naive I had. I think if I knew what I know now, I probably would have been afraid to do the first deal because I would have had too much fear of failure. But I was like, oh, I like to decorate. That sounds great. Oh, this will be great. I'll fix this place up. It'll be beautiful. We'll sell it. We'll make money. That'll be great. No, not at all.
So
I had to go to
so
Home Depot and learn how to do everything: tile, cabinets, ceiling fans, paint, like everything. I learned and did it all myself, and I was like, oh, look at me, look at this house. This is great. I'm gonna do it again. And now
so
35 years.
35 years, which is an amazing testament. But the interesting thing is it came out of some naivety. You just didn't know what you didn't know, and you ran yourself into this situation. So just out of clarity, so when you actually got from stage one, which is you heard those gentlemen talk about that, and they're like, oh yeah, we rehab homes. And you're like, okay, so I'm decorating. I'm basically, interior
They use
designer,
the
right?
word
You're gonna
fix
go
up. We
in,
fix them up. I was like,
make them
oh,
pretty.
fix them up, make them pretty,
Um,
decorate, get blinds, order carpet, paint the
when
walls.
when you bought the first house, at what point along the way when you're in the process did you realize that's not at all what they meant?
Oh my God. So, so they were like, and again, that we didn't have all the Google and the, online records at courthouses and stuff. So they're like, we drive up to the court, and this is in Palm Beach County in South Florida, which is where I'm at right now. I still have a house down here. And so they're like, you drive to the courthouse, you handwrite all the addresses. And back then we had to use those big map books. There was no GPS, so I had to use the map books. And I would just knock on doors and say, hey, I see your property's a foreclosure. I'd like to help you out. I can fix it up. And, da, da, da. And so the first woman that worked with me, I'll never forget her. Her name was Barbara. She was also a single mom. She was living in a house on foreclosure. I was like, hey, you move out, I'll move in, I'll fix it up, and, we'll split the money. So we did our first deal, which was like a high equity partnering deal with honestly like a hug and a handshake. I didn't have paperwork. I mean, other than a sales contract, I look back, it's like, oh my God. And I fixed up this house, and I mean, 3 weeks in, I'd already painted, ordered blinds. Mauve was the thing in the late 80s. And I had the carpet put in. I was like, oh, the house is terrible. The appliances are yellow and green, and the kitchen and the bathroom. So I was like, oh my gosh. And so I immediately knew I was on over my head, immediately. And then at Home Depot, one of the guys goes, oh, we teach classes. You could come and do a class. I'm like, you do? So I didn't know. So my first class was tile. So I measured the bathrooms, and I measured the kitchen, took a tile class, bought all the stuff, and went home and tiled the whole entire kitchen and both bathrooms in one day. And I was like, oh, look at me. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know how it ended up looking as good as it did. And I took classes. I learned how to make screens and how to put cabinets together. And when Ada would be sleeping, I'd be building cabinets and cutting screens and putting up ceiling fans. And I just went to the Home Depot for everything.
Wow.
I
And
took
that was
so
all
many
while you were a
classes,
single mom.
so many classes there.
And you're a single mom through all of that.
All of it, yeah. I'm married now. Bill and I have been married 22 years. But when I married him, Ayla was 13.
Okay.
So I was a single mom the whole time. And, I went through my man-hating phase. Oh, men are dogs. I'm just going to raise my daughter. And I always tell people, like, if you're going through a bad breakup, rehab a house. It is the best therapy. Because you're mashing those cabinets and you're breaking things and losing a sledgehammer and tearing things down. And I was like, it was done. I was like, I feel much better. And I made 22 grand. So I was like, I'm doing this again.
Yeah.
So I worked through all my anger from rehabbing.
It's an outlet that produces an income. I like it. So you get the benefit of some trauma release, some stress release, and able to really probably deal with that and give yours. And I also might have helped to give you that purpose, right? Like you've taken on this task, you've got to figure out how to do it now. You've got a small baby who you're responsible for, and as you walk through that, that's a lot to engage. And then, like you said, you didn't really know where you were going. And so when you get through the first one, you're going into that next phase. So like you mentioned, paperwork and all the structure of a deal and like the handshake and the hug versus the actual like legal documentation. How long along that process did you go from the hug and a handshake to more structure? How many deals down the road did it take before you started to build more of a model or a system around your business?
So the first one I had, these guys like, oh, you just have people sign a sales contract, and like I had a contract with like little X's where people needed to sign. I had never even read it. I wasn't a realtor, nothing. And just a quick point is when I was going through this divorce, I had it when I was 30. So like from 31, 32, like we're going through all this stuff. And I thought, well, as I had told you earlier on my podcast, my family was like, grow up, work at a factory, work till you're 60, you work for the man. And so I spent a few months like, do I want to get a job? Because I could have a job and insurance and all these things. But she's a baby. So by the time she's 18 or 20, I'll be 50.
Right.
And I thought, so, or do I just want to work for myself and figure it out? And I thought, well, if I work for myself and I fail, I can get a job. But I knew if I got a job, I would keep it for the security to raise a child.
Right.
So I thought, I'm just going to jump in. If I fail, I can get a job. But if I get a job, I feel like I'll be stuck. So it was a big decision to make because, like you and I talked about, I didn't know anything about money. I had no financial education. I didn't know anything about real estate. I wasn't a realtor, like nothing. So I was really, and being naive, I think was my best gift. Because if I knew all that, I think I would have been scared.
Gotcha.
My
So
fear of failure would have been really high, but I was like, oh, I can decorate. I have excellent taste. How hard could that possibly be? That was my thought. And then I look back now, I was like, oh my God. So my second deal, I had an actual sales contract, and I had met someone that was a hard money lender, and they lent me money to rehab this house. And I did all my rehabs off of my Home Depot credit card. I had back then, I had like a $15,000 Home Depot. I don't even know why. I had this massive Home Depot credit card. And in the second house, then I'm going to the closings of the title company's like, hey, you need this. And the title company's kind of teaching me, and I'm still door knocking. It was like probably 4 or 5 deals in before I really understood like all the paperwork and like what an assignment of contract was and what I needed for the title or the attorneys. Florida, we use title companies. And I was probably like 5 deals, like a year and a half in before I really understood all the documents and what everything meant and what it took to get to the closing. And I'm selling these houses retail and how to get these people qualified. So I was just really learning a lot in the first few years. And,
wow.
but it's all good because my second house, and I don't even know how the hell this happened, I made $50,000. And I was like, I lost my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the richest person I know. I have $50,000 in the bank. And I was like, I'm never doing anything but real estate for as long as I live. So the second house like slam dunked it for me. And then like the next house I made like 8,000 on like a whole entire rehab. I was like, oh man, but the second one sealed the deal.
So the second one gave you the confidence to move forward to think. So when you did the third deal and only made $8,000, what again? So I've been investing myself. So again, I understand there's just things that show up that you may not have accounted for. Was that what happened? The market? What was the where if you look back at that third deal, like what caused the $50,000? Because I'm assuming that wasn't the original plan. So what got you that? And then in reverse on the next deal, where did you kind of maybe miss it or not see something
No,
that
no,
caught?
I can tell you one word: termites.
Termites.
There were bugs flying around. I was like, I'm gonna have to bomb this house. I did not know what termites were, and I did not know they get up in the roof and they eat up the beams and they eat everything up.
Wow.
And I was just like, we'll put off a bug bomb, the house will be fine. And it was literally ate up with termites.
Wow.
And so, thank goodness I had the money from the other deal. I had to like sister beam all the trusses.
Yep.
And I was gonna make like 30 grand on that one, and it was like 12 termites. So then I was like, oh, okay. So we're in Florida. We have bugs. I have to learn about bugs. And so it was, but it was okay because I had that money in the bank. So I had the comfort of like, okay, it's gonna take a little longer. It's gonna cost more. I'm still good. As long as I don't walk away with 0.
Right.
And I can honestly say, luckily, like knock on wood, that I've never walked away from any deal without making any money.
Good. So when you get
where I didn't like that one where I thought I would make this much and I made this much.
right.
I've never gone completely upside down. But I've learned about fire damage. Fire damage is not bad. It's the water damage to put the fire out. So
Yep.
how do I know that? Bought a house with fire damage. So
Yeah. When you look at the
long learning curve.
when you go to the fifth deal, so then you said, so okay, we get through the first five, we go into that fifth deal. So when you did start to understand all the paperwork, the modeling, and the different things, did you add a system? Did you add a person? Like where once you kind of got to that part where you were starting to be like, okay, this is how I'm going to do this moving forward. What were the first? Did you hire accountants? Like I know you had to have some people in your world already. Like how did you build your relationships at that point?
The first, so I don't like paperwork. So I am a person that a stack of paperwork, I can literally feel my chest clench. It's just like. So the first person I hired a bookkeeper. I said, listen, you're going to do my books. You're going to help me balance my books. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. And I said, and when I have closing documents, so she was sort of like a bookkeeper slash like transaction coordinator. Like when the title company needs this paperwork, you're going to do these papers and gather these things for me and call the people and like organize the papers because I liked rehabbing, the physical rehabbing. I enjoyed it. I was angry. It was physical. I'm 30, so I'm like, I'm so strong. And the paperwork, which is like cost me so much anxiety. That was my first person. I was a bookkeeper. But then by the time I had like 4 or 5 houses, I had a little money. So I was like, I could do 2 houses at once if I could hire some guys. So, and now there's a RIA group in South Florida. So I go to the RIA group. I found some guys that do work on houses. And I have this guy, his name was Moshe. I have him. And he's working over here with a few guys. And then I have him at this house. And I'm kind of going back and forth. And I'm buying the supplies and delivering everything. And kind of watching the jobs. Opposed to like physically doing as much of the work. And then from then I was able to do like 3 houses at a time. And by that time, I'm just really overseeing. I'm just going to house to house to house. I still didn't trust people to, go buy all the supplies and bring it to, because, contractors, you pay them and they use half up front and they'd use that to finish their last job.
Right.
So I was like a little bit of a micromanager, I think. And so I would still pick out everything, carpet, kitchens, whatever. I buy everything, take it to all the houses. And so I think I probably never had more than like maybe 4 deals at once. And usually I had a partner at that time. Then Sharon and I, we'd usually be in one of the houses working and doing simpler things. And then I would have like the contractor guy doing like the knockdown and the heavier things and, any moving of walls and things like that. So I just kind of, I don't know, by a couple of deals and hiring a person, I thought, well, I could get like someone to help. And I was like, I could just have them do that house and I could do this house. And I was like, I could have them do both houses. I could just watch. So it didn't take long.
You kept moving yourself kind of up the ladder. You started out doing it all, then kept climbing the ladder as you went along and kept adding people and sourcing people and then continuing. And then
you can't do all of it. And in the beginning, the very first one, I did the whole house. Like my sister came over one day, my mom, and they helped me paint. But I did all. I was hanging cabinets, and I'm like, oh, it's so hard to get them up. And I'm trying to figure out how to get this cabinet up onto something to lay it up there and put it on the wall. It was like I had to figure out how to work magic to make that stuff happen.
But you did it. And so, like you said, the ignorance happened to work to your benefit because you had to lean on people, lean on things to learn and grow. And so we've chatted again from your podcast. You talk about the education position where you more lean yourself today. So that's like the foundation of where you cut your teeth. Because once you start to sit in the top seats, you're still managing the projects, you're managing the buys, but then you start to move into that portion. At what point did you shift from not that you shifted away from doing the renovations or doing the business, but when did you shift into the idea of educate and bring everything to the public and say, hey, here's what I've learned. Here's how I can, give back from my knowledge and all the things I decided to do the interesting way.
Yeah, it's funny because I was really shy in high school, painfully. If you would talk to me, my face would turn beet red, like really shy. And I was shy till I was like 25. I don't know what happened. Somewhere along the way, I just became this crazy outgoing person. So I could never have imagined that I would be up in a room in front of people and teaching. And, I spoke someplace there was 10,000 people. And there was no place in my mind that would ever be a possibility back then. But what had happened, I think, is because I had gone through a foreclosure and I had my car repossessed. I went through a divorce. I went through that. And nobody came to knock on my door to try to help me. So now, as I'm still door knocking and meeting people and doing houses, I'm running across a lot of women going through divorces, and I'm like, I can like do like 4 houses in a year, and there's 1,000 people that need help in South Florida.
Right.
So with my smidge of knowledge, I ran a little ad in a newspaper like, hey, I'm going to do a little workshop at my house, and like 10 people came. And I was like, listen, I don't know a whole lot about this. I just know I buy houses and I rehab them. I don't decorate them.
Right.
And I'm running across people all the time. I just think there needs to be more investors around here because everyone's losing houses. And I started feeling like the need to like personally save everybody.
Mm.
And I was like, well, I can't save everybody. I can only save these people, and all these people still lose their house. And I started feeling like the need to save people. So I started teaching people, like, just go do this. Like, there's 10 of us now. It's just we can all work together. We can all help people. And then, like, a RIA group came, and then there was, like, 100 people there. I'm like, oh, wow, there's, like, 100 investors in South Florida. We can help more people. So I just started doing it because I was like, if a broke single mom that was literally fired from Denny's at 3:45 in the morning can make money, there's nobody that can't do it.
Right.
And I just wanted to help people because I saw all these mostly women losing their houses. Husbands weren't maybe paying child support. They were going through divorces, and they're just losing houses one after the other. And I'm like, man, there's got to be a way to help more people. So I thought, to help more people, I got to have more people do what I do. So I'll teach them, and then we'll help more people. We'll like make a little army. So
Right.
I didn't really know how to teach. I didn't really have a program. I mean, it was just really basic. I was so basic in my living room, just like 10 people sitting around eating crackers and cheese and talking about investing.
Well, I think you might have just hit on the most important thing. I think we complicate, right? Like, so when you think about investing, honestly, it is very basic. It is a house and it needs work. And once the work is done, it is worth more money. The complicated part, and again, I think you mentioned earlier, you didn't know what you didn't know, which gave you the opportunity to get into something where you're like, well, I guess I'm going to figure it out. Yeah. And I think when even now you say, basically, I just decided I wanted to tell people about what I was doing. And so I just sort of did it. I didn't know how to teach or do that. I think, but the natural reality is I think most people like a real human. They like, you're just an everyday human being in the world. And you want not only to be good for your daughter and a good mom and good with yourself and in all of those things, you're turning around going, you know what? And now I want to make sure that I can help anybody who will listen. Anybody who will just open the door. I don't know anything. So I'm just going to lean out and say, I really don't know much, but here's what I have learned. And what's crazy is we forget that most people are where you started. The average person just doesn't know much. We don't know what we don't know, and myself included. Like, I have a wealth of knowledge today based on all of the people I've listened to, all of those things. And so when you're saying it and you're like, yeah, and then you get to 100 people and then you're talking to 10,000, like that's insane because like you said, who wants to listen to a lady who was fired from Denny's a number of years ago on stage tell you how I started by accidentally thinking I was going to be a home decorator. Now I'm a renovator. Like, but what's really cool is I think that the coolest part about the story is that's exactly who so many people are. And when they hear that a normal person, not some trust fund, not somebody who had everything go right, you had a marriage breakdown, you decided you wanted to spend time with your daughter, you found a way to do that, you found a way to get through the renovations, you found a way. And then you take that and you say, here's how I did it. There might be a better way, but this is what I know. And here's how I'm going to support everyone I can in my world. Because again, you wanted to help as many people as you could. And like you said, there were so many people hurting. There were so many people in those spots. So again, when I
meet people, I'm like, want to move them into my house. It's like, oh my God, you're going to be homeless. And, and I tell people now, I'm like, listen, now people have so many options. They can watch all the YouTubes, all the podcasts. They can watch a million things. And then people are afraid to try it because they have like, what do they call paralysis of analysis or something? Because there's so much. So I feel like being naive and not knowing was my best gift.
Right.
And because I didn't know all the things that could go wrong. If I knew everything now I knew then, I don't know if I would have had the guts to do it for real. And and people, and I'm still that way. I'm like, hey, listen, I can teach you what I know. I've been doing it for 30 years. I know a lot. I've written a bunch of books. I know a whole lot. I've been on TV. I've done a lot of stuff. I can still teach you how to do step A, step B, 1, 2, 3, like here, because it's the same thing as it was then.
Yep.
I mean,
When,
I started to think about pre-pager, pre-Google, no pagers, no Google. I had to use
yep.
cell phone, pay phones if I was on the road that day. And I took my daughter with me. Like, if she was in the car, and I'd go knock on the door with the baby hanging on my hip. And people must have thought, like, this woman's out of her mind. But I didn't, but I'm proud. I never put her in daycare. I never missed a field trip. I was a Girl Scout mom. I did all the things I wanted to do and never missed any of that. So I'm one of these parents that doesn't have that guilt, like, oh, I wish I would have spent more time with my kids. I did. And I'm
That's
happy
amazing.
I did. But yeah, until she started kindergarten, she went door knocking with me.
There you
Baby in
go.
the car, load it up. We're going to go door knocking today. And we'd stop at the beach and have a picnic and have some lunch and get her out of the car for a minute. And she just drug her with me everywhere. That child's been to 1,000 closings
That's amazing.
as a child.
And what is so again? One of the things so in your world, the most thing you're most proud of, I'm assuming, is your daughter, right?
Yeah, I'm so
And
proud.
and so leaning in with her. So again, today, how old would she be now?
She's 35.
She's 35 now. Okay, so she's just a little bit older than you, or like after you've done a couple of those deals.
Yeah.
What is she up to these days? Like how
So
does?
she has rentals. And then I married Bill. So when she was 13, I got married. So
Yep.
Bill and I have been married for 22 years now. And when I married him, he had 2 kids and he had custody. So when I married, Billy was 11, my daughter Ayla was 13, Chris was 15. So we
Okay.
had 3 kids, we had 3 teenagers. So we're like, we're going to travel, we're going to be crazy, we're going to teach the kids about real estate. And all of them have rentals, they have commercial buildings. And Ayla just took off last month. She gave up her apartment, all her stuff, and she's going to go, she's like on the road for a year. And so which is like, so what she did is she lined up a bunch of house sitting, like all over. She's going to Switzerland for a month, and she just worked on all this stuff for a year or two and lined up like a year's worth of house sitting, like a month at a time, because you can stay free,
Right.
people's houses, and she's going to travel. So right now she's being a vagabond and she's living her best life.
That's amazing. And so
And
you
she's
mentioned
got rentals.
you have two other like stepchildren.
Yeah, they're my kids.
And yeah, no, that's why I
They're
said
all in real estate. My son, he's a monster. They're called high equity. So this is like something that Bill and I invented and we teach it to people. It's called high equity partnering. So I meet you and you're in foreclosure and you have a $500,000 house, but you only owe $250,000, and you keep thinking you're going to work it out. Now it's too late to refinance it. It's too late to sell it. Sale date's in 10 days, and we come along and we partner. We like bring the payments current, move the people out. We do all the rehab, and then like split the profit. So my son loves to rehab, so he does that with his partner. And this is their third year of equity partnering, and they'll make about 1.2 million this year.
that's
On
awesome.
those deals, he made like $800,000 last year. I was like, that's my boy. And he's married. He's got 4 kids. So we always say, well, you're the favorite child because you possess all of the grandchildren.
There you go.
And
Yes.
girls are like, my other daughter works for EDC, and so she goes to all these carnivals and she works and manages all that. But she has rentals and buildings and stuff. And Ayla's, staying all over the world this next year. But Billy's married, 4 kids, just he's on it. So
There you go.
he's got a lot of rentals, everything's paid for. And he does all these real high equity deals because he loves rehabbing.
That's
so
awesome.
they're all self-employed, basically. I mean, when you're house sitting, I guess you're kind of self-employed, but and Chris works for what's it called? Insomnia. It's part of the people that sell the tickets, not Ticketmaster, Live Nation or something.
Oh, Live Nation. Okay.
Is that
Yep.
it?
I think that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Live Nation. So under Live Nation is a brand called Insomniac, and they do EDC, which is the Electric Daisy carnivals, like where they do all the lights and
Yep.
everybody goes and does ecstasy and a bunch of stupid drugs and listens to the DJs. But she's like second in charge of that, and she loves it because they travel all over the world.
That's amazing. So
So the girls are traveling. My son's raising kids, and I got 4 grandbabies now.
the grandbabies. That's the real piece of the puzzle. So when you're looking at the world, I asked you earlier, like from your childhood. So when you look at your world in a reflective mindset, you started with food fights, which I think is awesome.
Oh
When
my
you-
gosh.
when you look at your family and you look at the reality of where you've been and all the things, you're looking at it going, okay, so what trait within you would you say is the most important thing that's gotten you through it all? Like when you look in yourself and you self-reflect, you're like, hey, like when I was a kid, these things, and then when I was a young adult, and then a young mom, and all these things throughout life. What was the trait that you most espouse to or look to and say, thank goodness for this trait? And I know you've mentioned a couple times, the naivete, but that's more just knowledge. But a trait built within you that you would say really has made you the woman and grandma and mother that you are.
I'm a Mimi.
A Mimi, sorry.
Grandma
Mimi. Grandma is for old people.
I
Yeah,
am a
okay.
Mimi.
Mimi.
You know what? I have always, and it's gotten me in a lot of trouble in like high school and my young 20s. I have always been like, ooh, let's do that. And so I naturally have a high risk factor. So if you said, hey, let's go, I'd be like, oh, let's do that. And then I've always had a really high risk factor. And I look at like my cousins, and they're all very conservative. And like I'm the first person in my entire family ever to become a millionaire.
Gotcha.
My husband, he's from Iowa. He's the first person, he has a giant family. He's the first person in his entire family to also become a millionaire. But we both have a really high risk factor, and like we'll try things. We'll like jump out of a plane. Like we don't care. What is like? Oh, we'll buy some buildings and do a town. Let's just do that. And so I think I've just always been that way. And
so quick start.
Because I'm like, well, let's try it. And if we don't like it, opposed to people that go, oh, I don't want to do that. That's too risky. Like, I might get hurt. It's like, you might, but you might have fun. So let's just try it and see. But I was that way even as a kid. I was like the leader of the pack with all the cousins. And we got in so much trouble because I was like, let's do this and do this and do that. And we got in so much trouble. We would sneak out of the house and take a car, and I ran over a skunk one night, like 3 a.m. I'm trying to roll this car back in the driveway full of my cousins, and we hit a skunk, and the dogs are going insane and barking, and my dad comes out, and like we're all in trouble. So I was always doing stuff. Because I'm just like, what's the worst thing that'll happen?
But the benefit of that is you get such great stories, and most of it works out for the best. It's there are the moments, I'm sure once your dad came out the front door, you're a little bit like, well, this isn't great,
I've been in trouble a lot. But and I look at my family, and like my mom and dad did like the work for the man, and a couple of my cousins retired from factories, and like there's nothing wrong with that. But I just felt, that's why I moved out of Ohio. I left Ohio and moved to Florida because I thought, well, if I stay in Ohio, I'm going to end up getting sucked into like this mindset. And I thought, it's cold. I'd never even been to Florida. I just thought the beach sounded better because it was so freezing in the Midwest.
Right.
And I just came to Florida and with a friend, and we rented an efficiency, and I got a job waiting tables and just moved.
You just came up with an idea and went and did it. Like you said, that's what you keep doing. You keep going and you're like, hey, this sounds like a great idea. Why not? Let's go. Let's try it. Let's see what happens.
I did. We had the blizzard.
That's awesome.
I don't know. You're too young, but it's called the blizzard of 78. It was a giant blizzard across the Midwest. I mean, it snowed like 6-7 feet.
Wow.
And it was miserable. It was cold. I fell and cracked my head in the ice. I wrecked my car twice. It was just so much snow. I'm like, when this shit melts, I'm moving again. And they're like, you'll be back. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I am leaving the cold weather. And I left, and I got a little efficiency. I paid every week. I waited tables. I was like, there you go. And so I don't know. I just think I've always had a high, and I know a lot of people don't. And sometimes if you're overly conservative, it can keep you from investing because the end result's not always guaranteed.
Right. But everything has risk. I think that's what people forget. Like inflation just ate up, so when you're looking at your life, I think there's risk in both camps. The question is, which one do you have more control over?
Yes, I have the control over the risk I take.
Correct.
And I always said, like I said, if I work for myself and it doesn't work, I can get a job. But I know if I get a job and I've got benefits and insurance and this and that, I'm going to be responsible and I'm going to raise my daughter, which is nothing wrong with that either.
Nope.
But, when I was 30, I still looked at people that were 50 as really old. Now I'm 65. I'm like, well, 90 doesn't really seem that bad.
That's just getting started. Let's get going. So
I still thought like, oh my God, they have gray hair. They're so old. And I thought I'll be so old when I get done working. And I don't want to do that. I want to be the fun mom.
Gotcha. So you've been around for a minute, and that's okay. It sounds like you've lived an amazing life. Which decade? So if you rewind your life and you look at go in decades, right? And you're looking at it as systems, which decade do you look back at with the most fondness? Whether that's movies and music, whether that's the current like reality of your life. Like when you look back in time, is there a decade that stands out, or is it the current one where there's the grandkids? Like, you know, where would you look back to in your life and say, oh man, this one has the stories, this one has the music, that like, is there a specific location?
Oh yeah. So I turned 21 in 1980, and I'm living in South Florida, and I'm working in the bar business, and it's like disco and the polyester suits and the dancing and the music and the clubbing and the cocaine and the champagne and the drugs, and I was all in on all of that. And I was like, God, the 80s were so much fun. Everybody was just so carefree. We were all just partying. It was like one big party for a whole decade. And I know that's a terrible thing to look back on, but like some of my best stories are from the 80s.
Yep.
And then, I was born in 88. So now I'm a mom. And then, but like the 90s were great because I was taking her everywhere and I had a little mini me and we were rehabbing houses and moving and living in them. That was fun. And then I married my husband in the 2000s. So now I have extra kids, and like now we have a lot of money because he's doing it too, and we travel the world all the time with these kids. And then now I've had grandkids for a decade, so it's like I don't know, like all the decades had their own thing. But
Right.
I like having grandkids, and I like watching all three of my kids living a good life and not being stuck in some corporate type of structure where they don't have the freedom. Like my daughter just gave up her apartment, all her stuff, and she put everything in storage, and she's leaving for a year. Like who does that?
Somebody who has the confidence of their mom, who's watched somebody persevere, that's who's capable of doing it, because she knows you get one life to live and you might as well do it to its fullest, which sounds like what she learned from you is just go out. Like you said, it's like, hey, let's do this. All right, let's do it. Let's live life. And so again, even just listening to the stories, it's like you look at yourself, and I still think it's funny because you're like, I was shy at one point. It's like, it doesn't sound like you were overly shy. Now, again, there's the whole like weird puberty issue from basically 10 through 20. That's different. But you said for 25, all of a sudden you changed and came out of your shell. But basically you were the ringleader of the group doing all this stuff when you were younger too. So it doesn't sound so much like it was shy. I think you just didn't like to get caught.
Well, that too. I think I was shy. I was okay around like people I knew.
Right.
I can remember even like in high school doing speech class and having to do a 10-minute speech, and I'd be sick for 2 weeks.
Right.
Like and I thought, God, how do people? I don't know. I could never imagine like sitting in front of people and talking. But but I was also reading in the 80s. I was reading a lot of self-help books. I was going to Tony Robbins seminars and all the rah-rah. And I'm like, oh my God, that'd be kind of fun to be up on that stage and getting the whole crowd. And so somewhere there was a shift in my brain about instead of going to one, it'd be fun to be up there.
Ah.
And then my shell was open. And then I was out of control, and now I'm so out of control.
Hey, you know what? Well, you're out of control, but you've also created a life that allows you to kind of live as you choose. You can live where you want, when you want, and do the things you want to do with your life. So again, when you're looking at, we're going to wrap up in a minute, but when you're looking at this thing, so I know I asked about the decades, and then we'll go right back to the beginning with your parents.
Let me just jump in about the decades. So right now, my husband and I, he's from Clinton, Iowa.
Okay.
And it's got a little old downtown that's 3 blocks this way and 3 blocks this way. It's 9 blocks. It's on the river. Like here's Iowa, and there's a bridge, and there's Illinois. It's on the river. And so we decided a couple years ago, we keep going back there to visit family. Like this downtown is so run down. Maybe we should step in and like help beautify and rejuvenate this town. And then we found out there's a whole downtown partnership. So I think I'm having the most fun right now because I'm doing something I've never done. We ended up with 28 buildings in a really old little town.
Wow.
And we're bringing them back. We're restoring them. We're opening little businesses. We're having music festivals and summer festivals and Christmas in July and like all this stuff. It's like, oh my God, I feel like I have like my own little hallmark town.
That's awesome. So yeah, Hallmark Movie Town. You're
It
the
is.
one coming in to revitalize and
Yeah,
bring it back
Hallmarks
to
are
life.
almost all filmed in Canada.
There you go. Yep.
Almost all. So
And they all
I'm
have the
like,
same actors.
yeah, they do. I know, but I love all of them. I'm a Hallmark junkie. It's so weird. And I have the Hallmark calendar. It's like, okay, well, it's Valentine's Day, it's Love You Wear, it's in February, it's this. So we're having all these things happen. And it's really neat to see this town that was kind of ghost townish. And other people have bought buildings, and some people own their building and have their business and live upstairs. And it's great to see, like, over the last 4 or 5 years, so much activity. And, they have music on Thursdays in the summer, and like 2,000 people come
Wow.
downtown. And
That's
it's like,
awesome.
wow, like, we helped that happen. So
Yeah.
I think this is my most fun because this is something I'm completely out of my box. We know nothing about it. We just thought it sounded like fun.
So you're having some fun. So one of the so when you look at your parents, you look at your kids, you look at your husband, you look at any of the mentors in your life, who's had the highest level of influence, whether positive or negative? Like who has taught you lessons in a way? Because you can learn from both, right? You can look at people and be like, man, that's not what I really want, and man, this is something. And I don't need you to say the person if it's if that's too personal. But what would be the lesson? No, because again, but what would be the lesson that you're looking at going, okay, I'm really glad that either this person spoke to me this way, I'm really glad I saw somebody do these things so I could avoid.
I think a lot of why I am like I am is I don't know. I've always just had this really fun, spirited nature about me. And I think a lot of looking at my parents and aunts and uncles working these factory jobs and living in these tiny houses, and nobody flies on airplanes. Like I have people in my family that won't get on the airplane.
Wow.
It's like, but the planes take you to the whole world. And I think seeing that, I always thought like, gosh, I just don't want to live in West Mountain, Ohio, and my whole life and never go anywhere or do anything. And if I follow that path, that's what will happen to me. And like my dad retired at 58 and he got remarried, and I mean they've traveled the whole world. They had all this amazing great fun, but not until they were like 63 or 64, which is my age now.
Right.
And I've had all that fun and still have all these years left to go.
Right.
So I think the biggest thing was just looking at how no one in my family ever wanted to go anywhere or travel or fly, or if you couldn't drive to it, you didn't do it. And like I had no adventures until I was old enough to like move to Florida by myself.
Wow.
And not that that's bad, but I just always felt like there's got to be more.
There's more to life than this.
There has to be. And not that it's a bad thing, because like I'd love to go visit my dad, I would visit my cousins, and I'm like, oh, you guys are great. My niece and nephews, like they're all great. But I just always felt like I was just born for more.
Yeah. No, that's
I don't know.
hey.
So maybe I'm my own best fan. I just felt like has to be more to life than just this.
Yep. And that's an amazing, I think when you can get outside of yourself and then realize that the world is so much bigger than we are, and we get stuck in ruts. And I think, like you said, if things had been slightly different, you could have been stuck in that rut if you didn't make the quick decision. If you weren't a quick start and you take 4 months to make the decision instead of, I'm just going to go, you know what, this happened, I'm out, I'm down in Florida, right? How different does life look with such a minor change? And again, it's looking at life through some different lenses. And so when you're looking at the mentor, so the person in your world, so you brought up Tony Robbins, you've brought up, all the books and things. If you're looking at the books or a person, who had the greatest influence in helping you kind of grow as a person, maybe not in business, but just overall as a human being in that growth mindset?
Honestly, I'm a Christian, and I have been going to church as an adult to Calvary Chapel, like a real, kind of fun church and stuff. And I feel like really most of the way I have ended up is just following the things in the Bible. Like if you read the book of Proverbs, it tells you how to run a business. Like it literally tells you how to run a business. And so I guess I have to attribute it to God and to Jesus, but as I got more in the Bible and I started really following the principles, I was like, you know what? Everything you need is right here. How to treat people, how to treat your kids, how to treat your parents, how to run a business. Like it's all here. How to be kind to people. It's like it's all there. So I didn't have any person, because there was no like people that were traveling and doing seminars and stuff like that. And by the time I got into real estate and all that was happening, I was already doing it.
Right.
So I didn't go to like the rich dad and the
Yep.
things. I didn't do any of that. And I just always read self help books. And then when I got back into church, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to say without sounding like I'm all conceited about myself, but I feel like with the help of God, I just fixed myself.
Well, when you have the Holy Spirit in you, it does give you a power beyond yourself, right? So
No,
there's
like
a
seriously.
massive benefit in life when you mentioned it. It's follow the red letters, right? It's what are the words of the carpenter, right?
That's it.
And so when you look at Jesus and you say, okay, well, there's an emulation there that seems to produce in the world, which is the relationship, right? So you have a relationship with the person that can actually influence the reality of your world, mindset, body, spirit, and all, right? And so again, that's like to me, that's a really amazing answer. Again, you're dealing with a source that is unlimited, right?
It's
It doesn't mean
unlimited.
life is perfect by any stretch, but it does
No.
mean you have a resource and know that there's somebody who cares for you who's greater than yourself and allows you to be empowered to then treat and act towards others in the same light. So that's phenomenal.
So
I
that's
love that.
my favorite answer. And so some people are just like, oh, she's one of those Christians. That's like, well, I am. But you know
Yep.
what? I'm good to people. I'm kind to people. I tithe. I do the right things. I give to charity. I donate. I do all the things, and I'm good to people. You know, and
Yeah.
then I just like, you know,
Yep. I'm a Christian as well. I have a very
yeah.
similar path where again life the provider and the provision in my life as much as there's a practical reality to the way the world operates. I still know whose it all is. It's not mine to begin with, specifically my kids, my world, right? Relationally, it's if you have a relationship north south, you'll have a lot of better relationships east and like all around you, right? The east
All
and
around.
west. And
And you know,
so
in my
that's
20s, I was as much of a heathen as any living person could be.
yep.
And after I had Ayla, I thought, you know, I should raise her in church. So I remember saying out loud, she should be. I loved going to church and vacation Bible school. It was so fun. So I
Right.
started to raise her in church, which got me like rededicated back in. And
Yep.
then I was like, I just need to follow what the Bible tells me to do, and I can do all of it.
Yep.
And
That's
so
amazing.
I don't have a person.
That's
I
great.
have the Holy Spirit, like you said.
Amen.
So that's why my podcast I always end it with the truth is in the red letters, and you cannot believe how many people will email me and ask me what that means.
Ah,
I'm like,
yeah.
what do you think it means? So I had one girl, she's like, I've searched all over. I can't find anything. Is it like a group or what is that? And I say, well, it's the red letters. Everything in the Bible that Jesus said is in red letters. And
Right.
I've had two pastors call me and say every time someone newly gets saved, I tell them to start in the Gospels. And now after I listen to you, I tell them to start reading the red letters and see where it leads them. And I was like, oh my God, seriously? And I go to real estate conferences, and there's a big one. I do Sunday service, and you know. And at first, I was like, "Oh, I can't preach, and I can't pray in front of people." Like, "Oh my God, there's no way." And now I'll be like, "Okay, I'm gonna do. I mean, who's coming?"
Yep.
so,
Oh,
I
that's
don't know. So
amazing.
that's like Jesus is where I go. That's all I
So
have to give the credit because I can't give it to any person. Because I really, when I started my business and got back in church, it was all around the same time, and I just went with that.
so when you look at the faithfulness of God in your life, it seems fairly evident that He's remained faithful to you. So that's an awesome testament to your
Yeah,
faith in God. So, you know,
yeah.
and when you bring up the heathen of heathens, I think that's pretty much every human being until they recognize because till you see your sin for what it is, you don't really know. Then that's what the grace and mercy of God's there for. So
Oh,
like praise the Lord that He allows us as imperfect human beings and still imperfect human beings to be loved and cared for
oh
and
yeah.
to allow us His love so we can pour it out even though we're not perfect, right?
And
So that's just
that's why I
amazing.
have a good marriage because when God started putting it on my heart, like to start preparing to be a wife, our church, Calvary Chapel, had a Friday they had a singles Bible thing, and so
Yep.
they had a couple of like 3-day camps for singles. Like the girls are like the Girl Scout camp. The girls are over here, the boys are over here,
Yep.
and I started thinking about like they were saying things like, well, if you want God to bring you a husband, you can't be going to bars and sleeping with people because that's not
Right.
you're not being a godly woman. So why would you expect God to bring you a godly man? And so I started. I got a couple books from the Calvary Chapel and started reading that. I thought, okay, I feel like a husband is somewhere around, and it's time for me to like really like straighten up all my stuff and be like a Proverbs woman. So that's how
Mm.
when I met my husband. I had 5 of my friends that were Christians. We fasted for 3 days. I was like, I'm not just going to get married.
Wow.
It's the big step.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just funny because like it all worked out.
Well, there's the providence of God. He has a way of working through it. No, like,
And Bill's amazing. My kids are all saved. They're all baptized. It's like, oh, thank you, Jesus. And
yeah.
my grandkids, they love the Lord. They're little and they just love it. And they go to church and they sing all the songs. It's like, oh, we got a little generational thing of generational wealth and money and godly kids and grandkids. So I feel proud about all of that.
That's a legacy worth leaving, it sounds like. And you put the glory where it's supposed to be, on the shoulders of Christ, right? So like it's interesting because in today's world, the faith conversation always has its moments where, again, if you deny me before the people, I will deny you before my Father. And again, it's designed around the concept of, again, you need to understand where the power comes from and who gave it to you. And when you look at, like, again, the shyness, but the personality God built into you with the purpose He instilled in you, it's just amazing to see the woman you've become, the mother, and is it Mimi? Mimi, you are. Mimi. And so again, it's been an awesome conversation. I would ask you, like, I usually have another question, but I already know the answer based on that, because it's the book, and the book's going to be the New Testament, which would be the red letters of Christ, the Gospels. So when I look at that, and then Proverbs is a foundational thing. So again, it was a really awesome conversation. Is there anything?
Have me on your show. I love being on your show. I always tell people, like, listen, Proverbs tells you how to be a wife, tells you how to run a business, tells you how to raise your kids. Psalms is like all that great stuff when you're going through all your things that you're going through. It's like it's all there.
Yep.
But people just, I don't know. A lot of people, if I tell that, they're just like, I'm like, hey, you asked the questions. I'm giving you my answer.
The truth is the truth, whether you like it or not.
That's it.
Amen. Is there anything you'd like to, again, from the perspective of business or like where people can find you, anything you want to leave with the listeners?
Well, sure. Dwanderful, so DWANDERFUL, Dwanderful.com, anywhere. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, like all Dwanderfuls all over the place. So I'm easy, and if you go to my site, you get some free ebooks, and I've got a 200-page training, the top 7 real estate investing strategies for today's new market. People get that free. So I'm all about giving out as much free and as much content and helping. And then when someone says, hey, Dwan, I'm going to work with you, then I'm always excited because I guide them down the right paths.
Awesome. So you also offer coaching?
End up working with me because they're like, oh, man, you just talk about it. I'm like, what am I going to not talk about, And so I have a lot of Christians that will end up working with me and letting me be their mentor. And I'm like, well, listen, I can tell you how to do all this, but like you gotta stay in the Word, Gotta keep your mind right, and like the world's so crazy today. I don't know how anybody doesn't live with like the Holy Spirit. The world's insane.
Yeah.
If we thought about really deeply how insane the world is, it would be terrifying to be alive right now.
Well, again, the benefit we have is we know who's in control of the outcome, right? At the end of it all, there's a story that's already written, and we get the benefit of the knowledge that He will return, and we don't get to know when, but some point judgment's coming. And, thank goodness that God reached our way and we made the simple choice to say yes and change our lives towards Him. So it's been amazing to have you on the show. Dwan, thank you so much for being here. And
thank you for having me on today.
Thanks to all the listeners out there who are listening. We're going to have way more stories like this. Really cool opportunity to get to know the heart of other human beings. That's the purpose of this show, just to get to the heart of who they are, learn about their life, and understand, guys, that everyone's human along the way, and we're in this together. Thanks so much for listening.